The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and joining me today is Rowan Aderyn. I'm so privileged to welcome Rowan on the show. So first off, hello and welcome.
Oh, hi, Andy. I'm looking forward to this because I enjoyed having you on my little podcast and it felt like we could talk for hours. So I've no doubt that this will be another good conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it as well. It's we'll have to watch the timer and make sure the camera doesn't run out and things like that, and just keep going. So a little bit about yourself first off. This is where I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. So Rowan is a Lean Six Sigma black belt with a master's in project management who occasionally lectures at the University of South Wales and writes poetry, a recognised LGBTQ plus role model and parent with 2 children who founded the charity Foster's Futures, which I've looked into a little bit, led the work to see Newport become the first city in Wales to recognise care experienced as a protected characteristic, and is leading the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Work Group for the Royal Foundation's Newport Homeless Initiative to End Homelessness. Well, first off that's a heck of a list of accolades. So, wow, that's a CV and a half that you've got yourself there, Rowan. That must take ages to write out.
Oh, no, never. I don't write it out. Why would you, Andy? You and that form make everyone fill in.
Well, obviously, that is an incredible list of accolades, but obviously you haven't just been kind of given those. It's been quite a journey to get to that point. So I could have added in there as well that obviously you are a care leaver. Obviously you've you battled with mental health from your own side of things and dealt with the trauma that you experienced in your life, and you've also experienced homelessness as well through that journey. So to come out the other side, well, hopefully people are going to find your story some level of inspirational, if nothing else, and give hope to some individuals to kind of go, hey, looks what you can do, doesn't matter what the past, doesn't define you, kind of thing. So first off, are you happy to kind of tell us about your story and how you ended up in care and as a starting point?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you say, it's really important to be able to share and recognise for other people from all sorts of backgrounds and difficult kind of paths in life that it's a journey we're all continually on. And I absolutely still have no idea where this road is blooming going to lead, but I can absolutely talk a little bit about some of the kind of turns and twists that I've had so far to date. So if I start, right back at the beginning, I suppose, I was around about the age of 10 when I went into care. And I think for all intents and purposes, to a lot of the outside world, we probably came from quite a good family, quote unquote. So my dad worked as an electrician. He worked really hard a lot of his life. He went on to achieve a number of things in his professional career. My mum was very much a giving, charitable member of the community. She set up the first charity shop in our city, which people might curse her for these days because I feel like we're overrun with charity shops.
Yeah, did she start the pandemic that we have now?
No, I know. But that was a big thing. Gosh, what would have been about 60 years ago now in that space. So, really, I suppose to a lot of people, a good family. But as is often the case behind closed doors, things aren't quite as they would appear. My dad really struggled with alcohol. He had a really bad drinking problem, which just got worse over the years. And my mum had a lot of challenges with mental health. She'd been through a number of difficulties herself. Probably the most recent of which before me was that my brother that was born a couple of years before me had passed away when he was only a few hours young. But that was probably the final in a number of challenges that she had to face and overcome. And I think she struggled in that relationship and that marriage as well. She really wasn't in a safe space. So that's where it started. And my mum had been in and out of a mental health hospital over a number of years. She'd attempted suicide in a number of different ways. And I think we had seen lots of those attempts as well at home as kids and experienced that. And it was on one of those occasions when she'd gone into hospital that she had confided with one of her doctors that there was harm to me and my sister as well, and that we had been experiencing abuse, and that mum had also at one point tried to actually take our lives. So I think for mum, the way she described it was things were so hard and she was so afraid of the world that we were living in. She felt the only way to get us out of that was to actually end our lives, which is really, really, I can't ever imagine a parent getting to that point. So we went into care, and me and my sister were in one foster home together, really gratefully. We had one foster placement the whole of our care experience time, though there was other children who came and went from that home. And then the journey doesn't stop there. No journeys do. So I know I left care and actually ended up going back to the family home around about the age of 16. And at the time, my father had a new partner, and it was believed that there was kind of hope of a good future for us in that space. But things quite quickly deteriorated again. That relationship failed and she left. Me and my sister then stayed, and I probably stayed there for at least 4 years in what was increasingly horrific and worsening abuse of every kind. And the night I left, that was actually one of the hardest nights I've ever faced, Andy, because I had to leave my little sister behind. So my little sister had a number of learning difficulties. And the night I left, my dad had come into my room. He was absolutely sozzled, as was often the case. And I knew where things were about to go. And I just stood up and walked around him and started packing a bag. And he literally turned to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going." To which he laughed at me and left the room. And I thought, wow, okay, this is going to be easier than I thought. But by the time I got downstairs, he had locked every window and door in the house. And it took me over an hour to get out. And that night, I knew I potentially didn't have anywhere to go, and I was prepared to sleep rough. So I had to leave my little sister there and face what were the hardest, probably 3 or 4 weeks of my life then, trying to sort out accommodation to be able to go back and get her, for her to come and live with me. And of course, there's about 100 stories over that 4 weeks alone. But I think in other ways, life has been really giving to me. I had some great experiences as a teenager. I was part of the Air Training Corps, which is like a kiddies version of the RAF, which was absolutely epic and amazing and taught me so many different things.
Was that during? Was that after? Was that before?
That was
or when?
Foster care. So
Okay.
Foster care was how I actually got into that. So probably for about 3 or 4 years while I was in care, I was in the ATC and I made the rank of corporal. So I got to wear little stripes as well. It's proper kiddie stuff, honestly. It was epic though, epic. And then I'm really, really lucky I met my husband. And there is a brilliant story around how I met him and how we got together, because when I first met him, I really didn't feel worthy of him. I don't know how to put it any other way. He was a really polite, caring, giving, brilliant guy. And there was a couple of events then that really flipped my perspective on that. And we've been happily married for 16 years now, probably together 18 or 19. I know. I am, and I think I'm really jammy because I am so jammy because that happy bit is hard, right? After 18 years together, but there's definitely still in the title. And I think was really lucky with my career. So I started working when I was still in high school. I actually used to leave high school and walk to work and work from 4 till 8 p.m. And I've stayed with that same company ever since. And they've been absolutely amazing in training me, investing in me, giving me all sorts of brilliant opportunities. So yeah, I think that's a bit of the journey without the kids speckled in there or any of the other.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I say 10 years old when you first went into care then. And it sounds like, so foster care kind of worked for you a little bit. Sounds like it was quite a positive time. Was it at that point?
I was really, really lucky in the placement that I landed in. When I speak to other care leavers now and understand more about their journeys, I was definitely in that good end of the scale. I think even within that good end of the scale, you reflect on it and it's a very different experience. So I had all the usual friends couldn't come to play, you know, I was the foster kid. I didn't get taken on all the family holidays because I wasn't actually part of the family. There was like one computer in the house that I got to use for a little bit, but then my foster mum wasn't very happy about that. So I got told that even though her biological son, who was absolutely amazing, was happy for me to use it, I wasn't able to. So yeah, I think it's this. I am grateful every day I was taken into care because, frankly, I would not be alive. I just wouldn't be alive. And I am really, really grateful that I landed with the family that I did because it gave me so many other things. And they were really supportive, actually, even after I left care. You know, they were an amazing family, an amazing group. And one of the other foster kids that was there, fostered at the time with me and her are probably more like sisters now than I am with any of my biological siblings at times. So yeah, I definitely took a lot of good stuff away from that time.
Well, it sounds to me that you kind of went through a period where there was a lack of acceptance, but it was a different sort of acceptance you felt during that time. It was never like a family acceptance in what might be classed as typical, but you felt that you did have support, that you did have an element of nurturing, things like that through the journey. So although yes, maybe it could have been better, you pull out the bits that, well, obviously you've turned it into a strength, I suppose, even the stuff that you went through. And it sounds like they were quite a loving and supportive family to some degree or another. And you did build some bonds through that. Are you still in touch with those foster family now? Or is that kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit?
That's like, we could do a whole podcast on that, can we? So I think it was a bit sporadic on and off when I left care. I absolutely stayed in touch with my foster sister. So was also fostered there, and she was actually where I went to stay. So I just rocked up on her doorstep that night. I left my father's house and was like, I've got nowhere to go. Please, can I stay with you? So gratefully, she was like, yeah, you can stay on my sofa for a bit. But that wasn't sustainable for a number of reasons. But I've really valued her friendship and support over the years. And I think we've both gone on to have quite successful futures and families and careers, which is often not heard of in this space. A lot of other foster children really struggle for the rest of their lives, actually, as long beyond care. And then in terms of the biological foster family who fostered me, I had a period when I went back where I had no contact with them. So all that time I was actually still at my father's, I had no contact with them at all. And I think it was only after I'd left my dad's then that I reached out and started to build a bit more of a relationship with them again, which was wonderful because I really really, really missed them. And particularly like one of my foster brothers, we used to go for walks around like fountains and out in nature and everything. And I've got so many happy memories from that. But sadly, again, life construed things in a very strange way. And there was some unexpected events that occurred in that space that meant I'm no longer again now in contact with my foster parents, which has been really, really difficult, if I'm honest. I feel like I've lost a bit of a second family again, which is a shame.
I think that must be something that for many children who've been through the care system in some way or another, that there's this I think for myself, obviously I'm very lucky that I know my family. They're still close to me. Both my parents are still alive. They're still together as well, which is quite unusual in today's kind society. So I can always go back and ask them questions about how I was at potentially any point in time to some degree or another. I think anybody who's been through, and obviously this isn't just kids who've been through the care system, is it? It's also like kids who've lost family members and stuff, because mum and dad are going to have different perspectives on who I was as a child to each other. So it's nice to hear those two different perspectives. So I think anybody who's had that, it must be very difficult to kind of feel that slight loss of being able to know exactly who you are or who you were and where you've come from. Obviously, it's disjointed for us all to some degree, but that must feel quite strange. Is your husband gone through a similar circumstance, or are you from very different worlds?
Very different worlds. So he's the standard 2.4 children. He's got two sisters. Dad was in the army, then he drove buses and lorries. His mum was a lot of the time at home when he was growing up. They're still together, and like
Yeah.
they got, I don't know, 15 grandkids between them or something. I'm probably getting that wrong, but yeah, very much. I mean, he had different experiences in different ways. So when we met, he had never spent a night away from home. Never.
Oh, wow.
Never been on holiday. Never been away with school. He'd only ever slept in his own bed. So
you were a bad influence.
I know. But he definitely, I drag him all sorts of places now. So yeah, different experiences, but no, a very steady upbringing did my other half. And
do you find it, sorry.
No.
Do you find it interesting to see each other from each other's perspective on that completely different family dynamics when it comes to like, especially special events and things like that? Can you see the difference between the two of you in that circumstance?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really grateful that my kids have got some of that stability on his side of the family. So my parents aren't around anymore. So they don't have that generational sense from my side of the family. But in his side of the family, they get that. The aunts and uncles and the cousins and the second cousins and the who's this random person turning up now. And Nanny and Grandcha kind of always being around. And I'm so, so grateful for that. I do think it's interesting what you were saying about having that relationship with your past, though, and that challenge around not having those reference points to go back to. And I think in some ways that can be quite freeing, because you don't have those boundaries or definitions or expectations. So I think where foster children can really struggle, as I certainly experienced, a real lack of expectations or the wrong expectations put on you. So a certain set of assumptions. So I would get in school when my teachers find out I was fostered. Ro can't be fostered. Ro's too good. And I would literally overhear them saying this. And I think that built expectation of foster children behaving in a certain way, it can be really damaging. But if you can make the kind of switch to go, actually, what you're all saying about me isn't the expectation I'm going to set myself. And if you can recognize that, I suppose it's a bit of independence at a young age, isn't it? And it can be a two-edged sword, but you can really shape your own kind of path then in terms of what you want to expect to achieve and do and how you expect to behave and live.
I think that leads us really nicely onto, obviously, you raised this initiative to have being a care leaver as a protected characteristic that's now recognised by Newport County Council. I mean, I suppose I never really thought of it needing to be a protected characteristic because obviously from my side, I've never really experienced that kind of the prejudice and the stigma and stuff that you were just referring to there. So what kind of stigma and prejudice, other than what you've just mentioned with the teachers, have you come across other stigma and prejudice around being a care leaver before?
Yeah, 100%. And I should recognise, first of all, that the small action I took was off the back of some brilliant work from Terry, who's been driving this campaign in England to get loads of councils to recognise care experience as a protected characteristic. And there's a whole history there about the government's own specialists recommending that this action is taken. And then, as often is the case, things not necessarily being followed through in the way that you would hope. But I'm slightly competitive. And when I heard about Terry's campaign and started to have conversations with him and found out there was nowhere in Wales that had yet done it, that was it. My state had to be first. So again, I'm very glad that I feel like there's a competition nobody's told me about, but I will. And yeah, I think to give some other examples, the care experience people definitely experience lots of different prejudices in the workplace and within our communities. I've spoken to and heard from care experience people who've at interviews mentioned all their care experiences come up and the room just goes cold and you can tell you're not landing that job. I've spoken to care experience people whose teachers at the front of the class have announced to the whole class that they're going into foster care. And I think my own personal, what was one of the most upsetting experiences I had is I'm a member of a local sporting club, and we were having a discussion one night while we were all just gathered about care experience. And one of the committee members turned around to me and actually said, word for word, we don't want care experienced children or adults here. And I just, if you took away those two words of care experience and put anything else in there, it would not have stood. But it went unchallenged, that statement. And my response was, you do know that I'm care experienced, don't you? So it's kind of like, you've already got a care experienced person here. That's just one of the many examples I've come across of a whole load of assumptions and prejudice being applied to care experienced people.
I find that, again, I feel when I started to engage more with care experienced adults, and it's probably only been over the last few years that that's been the case. I think I must have been, even though I've been in the care industry for a very long time, but I've been on the other side of the care industry. I've been the carer. So I think I found it shocking because I'd been that carer. They're just, I don't know, for all discriminatory and prejudicial. I know I will have prejudices. I know I will have discrimination factors that are ingrained in my psyche from scripts and stuff like that. I don't claim to be completely non-prejudiced. I don't know what they are sometimes. They're in there somewhere, I should imagine. But that's not one I'd ever thought of, that I didn't even realize was a thing and needed to be kind of picked up on, because I wouldn't. For me, I'm very much value the individual as the individual. What are your actions? What have you done? How do you present? Not what's your past and your history. Because if people looked at my history, then I wouldn't be where I am. It's completely, I find that so odd. But I suppose, depending on your experiences of, stereotypes are very easy to create, the one to the many, aren't they? So, if I've been on the receiving end of a criminal activity and I then found out that the person was a care leaver, maybe I would make that kind of association across that means that all care leavers are dangerous. I don't know. It feels strange to me. And I've been the victim of crimes and not felt that way. I didn't do that about the person who mugged me was a drug addict. And I didn't do that, well, all drug addicts are going to mug me. So it never made sense to me that way. But yeah, so... Yeah, I find that odd. I find that a really strange mentality, and it's amazing that it ever needed to be kind of raised. But well done for raising it, I suppose. And that's the importance of things like this, isn't it? That for me, from a place of ignorance, I may not pick up that that's something that is a vulnerability for many of the children and stuff that I've supported, that when they're going to go into the real world, they've got to cope with that stigma. And it's preparing them for that, I suppose, as well, isn't it? So, yeah, really interesting. So how is that? Yeah, how's that initiative kind of changed things? How does that affect?
Oh, so massively, I think locally for me. So the local council, and I think it goes beyond local council. So a lot of businesses will utilise the Equalities Act as almost a framework. So when they come to establish anything, training, development opportunities, apprenticeships, they will use that model to understand who are the people in our community that we want to support and that we need to potentially provide a bit more help to. So getting care experience on that list means that it's now being embedded into all of the standard council processes. So when people think and talk about any of that activity that council support, they will be cognizant and thinking of, what do we need to bring to the table differently to support care experienced people? For me, I'm also then supporting the council to rewrite their corporate parenting strategy. So part of what they're doing there around refreshing and understanding how they can best support people who are in that care system today is really exciting. And I'm sure will have a massive amount of positive impact and change. And they've got some brilliant things going on locally with local businesses doing apprenticeships and things. So it's really, you can feel the difference it makes. And not just to those in care. I think when you do get under the bonnet of these systems, there are challenges that everybody who works within them faces. And I think part of the activity off the back of recognising care experience as a protected characteristic has been to start bringing some of those people together so they can understand each other's perspectives and how to better build a system that supports everybody, really.
Do you think there is there certain vulnerabilities for those with care experience that has to be considered? Is it just overcoming the stigmatization around that label, or is there other factors that you think organizations, obviously, I'm immediately thinking, obviously, but trauma informed, and obviously being care leaver and trauma informed are really kind of, to some degree, synonymous with each other, I would say. Not direct, but definitely connected. So is that kind of what you're thinking as far as that reasonable adjustments and making sure the inclusion and equity is there for individuals who've come from care?
Yeah, 100%. If you look across any of the dimensions in terms of health, housing, education, or employment, there is plenty of data that demonstrates time and time again care experienced people suffer massive disadvantages in those spaces. They experience one of the largest pay gaps, although we rarely, if ever, report on it. Their health is 70% more likely to die prematurely. As you've called out there, the kind of mental health challenges, suicide rates, a lot of the continuing into traumatic futures, I would suggest as well, are heavily unbalanced towards care experienced people. So there's definitely a big part of that. And then similarly, in terms of housing, so care experienced people make up a quarter of the homeless population in the UK. Some suggestions in Wales actually that that's even higher. People will talk about being care experienced as a rite of passage to them becoming and experiencing homelessness. So I think at all of those dimensions, they need and would benefit from additional support.
The one statistic I tend to hear around care leavers that you haven't mentioned there is that they make up a significant element of the prison population. Okay. And I'm wondering if that's where that stigma comes from, because that's the only fact that's sometimes thrown around. And I think we're still in this old school mentality that bad behavior is purely choice and therefore it should be punished, rather than what is the journey that these children have been through related to trafficking, exploitation, the trauma responses to being able to self-regulate and things like that, where if they'd be given the right support, they'd be given the right kind of inclusion, frameworks to be able to help them, the expectations being shifted from their chronological age to maybe where they were developmentally due to missing out milestones, they wouldn't have ended up in prison. So the statistic, as far as that stigma comes from, is the outcome of all of this lack of kind of recognition and understanding that's led up to that outcome. Does that make sense? And I don't know whether that maybe hits a nail.
I think you're right, Andy, in that probably is part of the basis for a lot of that stigma. I think the reason I always kind of shy away from that statistic actually is I find it really frustrating that often does get brought up more than any other. So if you want to talk about how many care experience get the opportunity to go to uni, nobody talks about that. In terms of care experience, people experiencing homelessness, so going on from having some of the hardest starts in life to then finding themselves without a home. Like, people don't talk about that. If you want to talk about the mental or physical health, it's not even just mental, the physical health problems that care experienced people will disproportionately go on to struggle and suffer with. People don't talk about that. So I think it's an interesting one. I totally agree with you that I have no doubt a lot of the challenges that those children, and I always find it easy when people like you and me are talking. I'm an adult, like I'm totally here. Imagine I'm a kid. Like when I went into care, like my favorite thing in the world was teddies. I loved Peter Pan. I was obsessed with Disney. All I really wanted to do was color and play school, so I could write on a chalkboard and be like, "Now, class, be quiet." And that is the person then that was getting abused and had their life threatened, and then was put in a position where they don't know where they're going to live and they don't know what safety and security looks like. And for a lot of those other kids, their journeys and experiences within that care system, sometimes I wonder what's more traumatic, the care system or what happened before the care system for them. And then it's inevitable, isn't it? Aren't we just like, we almost are forcing them to walk that path in life where they have no other opportunity but to possibly end up in spaces like the prison system, because every other opportunity, school, job, a house, so many basics that we all take for granted just isn't there. It's just taken away. You're like leaving one physical path.
Thank you for listening to the Able to Care podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, comment, and share. We really appreciate all of you listeners. Did you reach a point where you recognized your mental health, that it was trauma? Did somebody else tell you it was trauma? How did you kind of come to that kind of realization and look and seek that help out for that part of your life?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So I think I absolutely didn't recognise it myself. And I think it crept up on me. That's always the challenge, isn't it, with these things? So you gradually just get a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And then it was an absolute external event that triggered my first. I've kind of had two bouts really of counselling. So I managed to burn myself quite badly making some soup for the kids one day. And
Right.
ended up eventually in Swansea Burns unit dealing with that. And it was off the back of that, because that incident really, I think, triggered a few different things for me, that I experienced anxiety like I've never felt before. So
Right.
I think the key morning for me that really pushed it was I was due to be getting on a flight to Edinburgh with work. So I got up at 4 a.m. in the morning, all my stuff was ready to go to the airport. And I had what I would describe as an anxiety or a panic attack, although not as what people would assume. It wasn't that I notably lost my breath or that, I wasn't sat there blowing in a paper bag or anything. I just literally froze. I could not move out of the house. And I absolutely felt like my whole body was just on fire, I would probably describe it as. And I think that was the point where I went, oh, crap, it's now impacting work. I can't do that. I need to do something. So I reached back out to Swansea Burns unit, and really gratefully, Swansea Burns unit, if you've experienced burns and been under their care, they have like a 3 or 5 year period afterwards where you can contact them at any point and they'll give you mental health support. So after what felt like quite a quick couple of months, I ended up getting some support from a psychologist at Swansea Burns unit. And we focused very much on the burns. So I was also struggling with things like if a room got very hot, I would feel quite anxious and uncomfortable, and I wasn't comfortable cooking certain things. And the whole time, this psychologist knew there was a hell of a lot more there to be going after. And she'd try and poke every now and again and be like, like, is there anything else you want to discuss or explore? Or is there anything that, and I'd mentioned that I'd grown up in care at some point or another, I'm sure, but I shut it all down. I was not having any of that conversation. I was just like, no, you just need to get me back to my pre-burn level, was what I kept telling her. So get me back to that pre-burn level, I'll be on my way. And she was wonderful.
Yeah.
She got me back to the pre-burn level, sent me on my way and said, if you ever want to come back, you know where I am, thinking, oh my God, there's a hell of a lot of crap that person needs to work through. And I carried on. So again, I carried on for a period of time, what I would consider my normal, not really feeling that I was struggling with my mental health until we had the COVID pandemic. Oh.
Right, okay.
And one of my triggers is very much because I didn't have the parents I wanted as a child. I've always invested heavily in trying to give my kids the life that I didn't get. So as a parent, I put a massive amount of pressure on myself to do the right things by my kids. And COVID just threw so many curveballs at me. And the final straw, the day before my daughter's last day in primary school, her little sister came down with a temperature. And under the current guidelines we were at then, we were all meant to isolate as a family until we got the results of a test result. So I went down to school. I picked Gwen up from school, my eldest, and said, you've got to come home. Your little sister's got a temperature. We've taken her for a test, but you have to come home. And she sat in my lap and she sobbed for 2 hours because in her world, she was going to miss her last day of primary school. They'd arranged to sign shirts and give gifts, and they had this whole, and they'd already had such a broken experience of that last year in school. So many things they normally would have done didn't happen. And my heart was breaking. And I had parents messaging me saying, like, oh, I wouldn't have done it. I would have left her in school. I just wouldn't have said anything. Why have you done that to her? Like, no wonder she's upset. And then I had other parents going, oh, I'm so glad you took her home. My father's like getting chemotherapy. And if it was COVID, and I just felt massively overwhelmed. And I came away from that one incident just so confused about my decision making and whether I was doing the right or wrong thing by them, and I was just totally overwhelmed. So that was really my proper therapy start.
So I take it I know that you've done EMDR, so eye movement desensitization reprogramming. Was that with the same therapist? So I'm assuming they're psychoanalytic as far as your therapist is concerned. Is that the case?
See, again, Andy, you'll use words now that I don't need to worry about too much. He's a clinical psychologist.
Right, okay.
So he's used the EMDR. I'm sure we've used a bit of CBT. He is brilliant at finding the right tool for the right conversation just out of the back of his pocket. And I think he's given me so much. He's really helped challenge my thinking. He's really calmed down a lot of those trauma responses. And yeah, I wish everyone could have him as a therapist. Genuinely.
Well, we'll put a link in the bottom. So are you going to get a kickback?
I keep sending people to him. I do. And I think he's like, oh, you need to stop this now, Ro. But I can't. Again, I think the importance for other people is recognizing when you are struggling, because I really struggled to do that, and I really pushed it to a breaking point when, let's face it, it's too late then, isn't it, sometimes for some people. So recognizing when you're struggling, feeling worthy of going and asking for help, not feeling like, well, there's others who need it more, there's others who are struggling more.
I think that's where trauma is so complex, though, isn't it? Because I think when, all mental health to some degree or another, but when things are going wrong, you kind of feel there's a reason that I feel like this. And I think even with depression and anxiety, you can sometimes kind of pinpoint, well, these are the little bits that aren't right in my life, or I haven't got a balance in my life at the moment. But I think that's where trauma is really difficult, because it's the things that you don't even remember being a problem. You've kind of wiped them out from your memory. They're the things, hypervigilance, I should imagine, has come from very difficult experiences, whether you're a young child, where those nightmares were real, but now they're not there anymore, but they're still appearing in your psyche. But if you don't remember them, and I think that's where people struggle with trauma as well, like, well, surely you remember the bad things, but no, not in an irrational way, in an emotional way, yes. And that's it. They pop up with little moments, little triggers, little stressors. So suddenly that's a very difficult thing to kind of know, oh, there's something not quite right here, and this is potentially what's going on. So I think it's difficult to recognize those symptoms in yourself for something like trauma.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think there is a difference between remembering and recalling, I like to say. So I think your body can remember. There's so many fields of new study and evidence now showing about that physiological impact of trauma on the body, but being able to recall it and actually bring that memory back to mind. Although having said that, I suffered with flashbacks, so I would recall some of the traumatic things that happened to me involuntarily, quite frequently throughout all of my life, really. So, and I think that's another hard thing that other people who haven't experienced struggle to get their head around. But yeah, I think it's so important that people try to understand what is a normal level for them, and also that if something maybe feels normal but doesn't feel good, it's probably opportunity to build a new normal in some way, shape, or form. And taking those steps can be so beneficial.
I remember reading a story that kind of helped me a little bit. So this was a story about a girl who was in care. She'd been in an adopted placement, adopted family for 5 years, very happy, very settled. She'd been through quite traumatic events early in her life and been through the care system. She was getting I think it was her late teens. She was still living with a family though. And she was suffering some gut problems with the gastrointestinal system. So they looked at and ruled out like Crohn's disease and allergies and intolerances, and they kind of ruled all that stuff out. And they ended up doing a kind of a stress assessment on her. They put it down, it must be stress related. So they put like the polygraph kind of testing that measures pulse rate, heart rate, all that sort of stuff. And they found that her base level of stress for most of us when we're in a calm setting. So like when she was watching TV with her family. So when she was at her most restful was the equivalent to most of us on a roller coaster. That was her baseline level of stress. So straight away, that's not something you're going to notice, feel. Because it's a bit like, I always kind of think like if somebody else was to jump into my body and then step out of it, they'd probably go, how do you cope with that ache in your shoulder and that ache in your elbow and that ache in your toes and your ache in your hands? And I'm just going, I don't even notice it anymore. It's just gone. And that must be very similar to how it feels to have kind of anxiety and that state of stress level all the time. You don't know because you live it. It's there every day. So it's like the smell that I can't smell myself anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's exactly the same thing, isn't it? But that impact, that stress level on her physiology, as you mentioned, it's the body holds it, the psyche holds it. That's going to impact on all sorts of areas of life for that girl going forwards. But without that recognition, without that support, without that help, without knowing that's the problem, how would she seek the right help? How would she know to? And I think that's an important part, going back to circling round, like, are care leavers getting the appropriate level of psychological, emotional, and even just social support moving forwards when they leave the system?
If you're lucky, Andy, which actually seems mad. But again, like, I'm aware of children within my local area at the moment, and they are still children. By definition, they are not adults, not 18. And they are living in hotel rooms without Wi-Fi, where the last bus that they can get on leaves the city at 4 p.m. So they're just having to be shipped out to some pokey Premier Inn, let's face it, miles out, with a tiny telly, no internet, no ability to socialise, no support, no way to job hunt, do development, do anything else. I've also come across kids who've been promised that they can stay within their current support until they're 18, to only be told later, oh no, I'm sorry, we have to move you on now for X, Y, or Z reason. And the impact to them mentally from that has just been devastating. And yeah, I think the care cliff is very much a real thing. There's a whole interesting piece, I think it was in Australia, they're doing the study at the moment as well, around care leavers who then go into care as elderly people. And
Right.
that transition back into another care environment. But because they're bringing with them that experience of having been in a care environment at the start of their life, that is so much more complex and challenging again. So I think the reality is, once we've existed in that care system space, we are care experience for life, and the support just isn't there. It isn't there, sadly. And there's lots of easy things that we could all be doing as a community and society to help build some of that support. So.
That leads me very on to nicely onto what my next question was going to be. So, I'm going to look into that study because obviously I do a lot of work around the elderly care sector as well, and I've known for a long time around trauma being massively an impact as far as the dementia world's concerned. Your resilience to keep that trauma box locked away is going to disappear, so you're going to get those flashbacks and stuff. But and I do stuff around attachment in elderly as far as, so that's already making that connection. But yeah, the just general principle of being a care experienced person, going back into that almost institutionalized or care experience world is going to have huge regressional impacts, isn't it? As far as that's the kind of thing that gets me excited, as sad as that is. Going, oh, there's something I don't know about, right? I need to delve into that a little bit. Okay, so what would have helped you? What do you think will help others? You just said there about, you think there's a few little things that can make a difference. So let's expand on that. What do you think needs to happen?
I think if you look for young children and people who are in the care experience today, it's
Mm,
about recognizing and helping them build their confidence and self-worth. So I mentioned earlier on the air training corps. That was
mm,
the one space where I wasn't a care experienced person as a kid. I was just a cadet. And actually, I got treated exactly the same as every other cadet. So it wasn't a special treatment. It wasn't I was given a softer or an easier ride. Some of it was quite challenging in the
mhm,
ATC, but it was a space that really invested in me and taught me to build and recognize my ability to do things that I didn't think I could do and my confidence and passion in things. So I think early on, which is part of what Fostered Futures, the charity that I founded, is trying to do, is help children find that passion, whether it's I want to learn an instrument or I want to play football or I want to be a dancer or whatever it may be, building that sense of self-worth in a safe space. I think as people get older, in terms of ensuring that that support is continued long past any magical age that people think is the number where you're able to totally
mhm,
just thrive as an individual. There should be continued support throughout any of the milestones or challenges that people come across in life. In the same way that now with my children, I hope that as they grow up, if they start to struggle financially, guess what? They'll come to me. If they want
mm,
to study something and they don't know where to go for information, guess what? They'll come to me. If
mm,
they fall out with a partner or have an issue with a relationship, guess what? They'll come to me. And these care experience people, they just don't have anywhere to go. There's nowhere to go to for career advice. Like, what do I wear to an interview? What are they going to ask me or say or do? Or I'm going to become a parent. What are some of the things that they don't teach you on the parenting course in terms of changing nappies or bathing the baby that I need to be thinking about? Prepare me, make me more
mm.
ready for those things to come. Or I've lost a partner and I've now found myself on my own again. There's so many milestones in life that we all face, and that network and support for care experience people just isn't there.
It sounds like you've done an awful lot of work, and maybe that air training core, why, it does sound like it did a lot of good for you. But you seem to have, although you still have your challenges, like we all do, you seem to have got a much higher sense of self-esteem than you have through an awful lot of your life. Do you think there was a point that switched for you as far as like that self-esteem's concerned? I know you're still on the journey and you're not at the end, but that's
Yeah.
definitely something I pick up from you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that absolutely comes back to that therapy point. So I think from months and months and months of therapy sessions of trying to work through it wasn't my fault and it wasn't all my responsibility and all of those kind of things. I think that absolutely some of those EMDR sessions, I swear, EMDR is like Marmite, right? But when it works, it works. And I could genuinely see a space where that is addictive because I would, some therapy sessions, when I'd go in for just a conversation with my amazing therapist, I would come out and I'd feel like I'd done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. I'd be like exhausted, drained, like find it really hard. EMDR, oh, come out and I'd be like, wow, my God, I feel 10 stone lighter. I'm buzzing, like everything's amazing. And all I've done is sat there and flicked my eyes back and forth and chatted a bit, which is really dumbing it down. I'm sure there's a lot more to the process than that, right? I'm sure there is. Or tapped, isn't it? Tapping. But yeah, I think that was a massive unlock for me. And I think actually what's been the unlock is not stressing too much about how worthy I am, but just recognizing that even if it's only a tiny bit, that tiny bit is worth something. And it doesn't have to be a big bit. And I still even like I play in some of these spaces now and I come across what feel like giants in terms of the people who move mountains to make a real difference. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I should be in this room. I'm not there. But I think recognizing I might not be the whole puzzle and I may only be a tiny piece. but that's the tiny piece I'm going to give and I'm going to bring, and I'm going to make sure my tiny piece is pretty and does a good job, and that's going to be enough.
What I would hope for people who what they don't take from this around care leavers is that they should just be telling them, you're wonderful just the way you are, you're worthy, just feel good. Because I find this a difficult thing, that people have taken self-esteem and they've twisted it. And self-esteem isn't about feeling good, it's about doing good to feel good. And I think self-mastery, mastery of the environment, learning skills, developing is how we build self-esteem. And being told you're wonderful, you're just wonderful, we don't believe it. We can only develop that through showing ourselves to some degree, kind of like, I succeeded in that. That means I'm not as rubbish as I thought I was. And I'm always cautious of people kind of wanting to make people just feel better, because I don't think it will last, even if you manage to do it for any period of time. I think it's that giving people the opportunities, and that's where I really like the fostering futures kind of aspect of what you were saying, because that's where true mastery can develop. Learning where their strengths are, allowing them the opportunities to try a million different things, and 999,000 of them might be awful and they hate it and they try it once and they never do it again, but it might be that one thing that suddenly just sparks their interest and it resonates with them and they become a master at it. They become a master in their art at it. And that's where that whole shift in psychology will change, that, hey, I did this and I never thought I could. And all those people who told me I wasn't good enough and that I was rubbish and I'll be useless and never amount to anything, well, look how wrong they are now. And that's always a message I'm trying to get out there as far as self-esteem is concerned, because I think it's we just have to be careful that the external short-term validation isn't the end of the journey for anybody. It is about their kind of personal growth, I think is hopefully the message I try and get over.
I think you're totally right. It is absolutely about that, isn't it? And part of that is about challenge and about failing as well. I think we can't protect these care experience people from challenges and failings. I've come across that as well. And it's like, what, man, they're definitely going to have a sharp shock when they go out into the world if you put them in a bubble from everything. So no, I'm totally with you. It's about building that confidence and that belief, and knowing that actually you can get it wrong as well, and that's okay. You can come back from it. That's not going to be the end of it, So,
but that's tying in with that sense of community, feeling safe enough to try, knowing that I've got some people who accept me unconditionally, and I've always got somebody to go back to go, I feel rubbish because I tried and it didn't work. So it's got to be a combination of that community and self-esteem, kind of I don't just send people out into the world and go, you might fail, but there's nobody going to care. There've got to be people that care about that as well. So I think I'd love to just finish off, if that's all right, as far as I think Fostering Futures sounds like an amazing initiative. Obviously I went on the website and saw a little bit about that. Is that something people can get involved in as far as a charity is concerned? Is there something they can either go and visit and provide that service, or how does it work?
Yeah, 100%. So if you run like a little football club after school with the kids, or you've got your own business delivering like music lessons, or if you've basically got any opportunity and you would be up for donating an opportunity in that space to a care experience person, you can go on the website and you can donate it, and we'll try and match you up effectively with a care experience person, remember, young person or adult. So we've actually had a donation for like yoga membership at one of the local clubs for an adult who's care experienced. So don't just stop with the kids, but you can do it that way. If you wanted to become a Fostered Futures ally, so we try and focus quite locally in terms of building that network and connections, both with social services and foster carers locally, but also with those businesses and opportunities. So if you want to work in your local area in helping to build and facilitate those opportunities, then you can reach out and get involved that way as well. So, and I think there's a big thing for me. When we started off with Fostered Futures, originally, we wanted to have no funding go through the model whatsoever. Because part of our concept was that as communities, we have a lot of the opportunities that we need to provide these care experienced people to help them develop and grow. And it doesn't have to always be about donating money to charities. It can absolutely be about donating skills, time, chances. So yeah, originally we were going zero money. The world just doesn't operate like that.
It's very hard to run anything. Yeah.
Honestly, it's like, oh man, I really didn't want to get in this messy space again. But yeah, so by all means, you can also go on and donate if you want to donate. But yeah, any of the support that we get is gratefully received.
It's brilliant, fantastic. Well, we'll make sure we put a link in the show notes and in the information around Fostered Futures for you as well. Yeah, but that's been an amazing conversation again, Rowan. I really enjoyed it. I think you've had an amazing experience, and it's so wonderful to see, I say, the list of accolades that you've come out the other side and you've turned it into something amazing, and you've got some real passion around it as well. And I think there's a few people I'm going to put you in contact with as well, because I think, especially around that charity, I think I've got some people I think could be interested in connect with you on that. So yeah, but
thank you, Andy. And everything
yes,
I've achieved has been an opportunity somebody else gave me, honestly. So yeah,
absolutely. Standing on the shoulders of giants, as we say. Yeah, absolutely. It's a community effort again, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.